right, I think we'll get started here. And we want to thank you for coming out, Sunday school. And you can take your Bibles over to Exodus chapter 8. But I wanted to go over a couple announcements this morning, just to kind of let you know what's going on. There's quite a few things, but first of all, this coming Saturday there will be a men's, I don't know if we'll say it's a prayer breakfast, but a breakfast, and we'll have a devotion and probably a testimony and things like that. That will start at 7:30. We try to have it where it goes for about 1 hour or an hour and a half or something like that, so we won't keep you too long. And so that's this coming Saturday. Then the next Wednesday, the last Wednesday of the month, we'll do a cookout downstairs on the Wednesday. And so I encourage you to come on out to that. And then also there's a youth activity on the 31st, youth activity. And they'll get more information on that. Then August 2nd, we'll have the Lord's Supper. That'll be here on the morning service. And encourage you to come out to that. And trying to do a few things a little different with the Lord's Supper on those, a little more personal. And then on August 4th, there's no slide on it, but there will be a pastoral search committee meeting. That is the 4th. August 4th, and I think it's like a Tuesday. And I believe Robert Stepp said he would be at that, so he must be feeling better. But I would say pretty much he is going to stay away somewhat. They told him probably stay away for 6 months and maybe a year because of the virus. And so that will be the 4th. Then it's hard to believe we'll be getting into school, and what we're going to have is a back to school Sunday, and with the back to school Sunday, we'll do a few things for the young people, and probably for everybody. I think we're doing something there. On that day, we'll probably preach a message that's for everyone. Yeah, Bill, you don't have to work. Well, you do have a college student, but we'll preach to the students, the parents, and whoever else out there for that day, back to school. And then the slide you do see, this is more for the school side. We have an orientation, I think it's on the 18th, and the juniors, seniors do a cookout there. They try to raise some money for their senior trip, which not really sure what will happen on the senior trip, because normally this year we go to New York, but I think New York City is saying they don't want Ohioans. Okay. So, yes, protest sign. All right, and so, but we'll do something there. All right, and then I think we get into September, and of course, then that will be Labor Day. With the Labor Day, it'll be like a normal service. The only difference, we might do something for Sunday school that day. Most of you have an extra day off there that weekend, Labor Day weekend. And then after the second, I think the next week we'll have, or 2 weeks after that, is what is, some of you remember, back to church Sunday. And we're going to try again to have this special group with us. These are friends of Brother Kruger. They'll come in, do the bluegrass, and he will preach. And then afterwards we'll have soup and salad. That is the date not on there? You know what? Well, it is real small. September 20th. You can't see it. It's in yellow. It's about the soup and salad. I don't know who makes these slides, but boy, they should be okay. Yes, it shows up better, but I can't read it. It's too small. All right. Okay, it's September 20th, I think. Okay. And then One that's not on there, Michael, I think I disabled the slide. It is about the college. Can you pull that one up? There we go, college outreach. Now, I'm going to talk about this one a little bit. We have not really done a ton of outreach to the colleges around here, and I'm not even sure what they're doing with going back to school. But what I'm hoping that we could do is kind of an outreach where we get on the campus, say that we have a special night, something that's maybe a game night, some pizza. It's all free, of course. Try to get them into coming on the campus here. And somehow what I would ask is for you to pray if somebody would say, hey, this is something I would like to help out with. Okay, now you say, well, what do you need to help out with? Well, again, since I've been here, we haven't really done a push on these campuses. So I don't even know how, let's say at Kenyon, we, are able to get in the dorms or get information. I'm not sure how that happens. So I need somebody to do that legwork. And again, you're probably not just going to walk into a dormitory, but you probably have to walk into the admissions office or something like that. And I'm just asking for help. And so if you would look at this and say, hey, this is something I wouldn't mind doing, and also at Kenyon College, not Kenyon, but the NAS, we would like to make a push. And so September 18th, so when you see that, I'm asking for some help with this ministry, okay, that we'll try to do. And I think other than that, we then get into October and quite a few things. Also, there's a few things that'll probably be a little different. It's hard because of this whole virus thing to know. Example, like with the choir, we have the choirs sing, which I'm thankful for the choir, but we're holding off on choir practices. Okay, some of you've heard, like with choir practices, where some churches had choir practices and then people got sick because of the singing, breathing hard, sucking in the air, and so we've chosen not to do that. And so really for our cantata, that might be a little different this year. And we've actually asked for a special guest to come in December. And I'm excited, at least some of you maybe have heard of him, is Dr. John Getch. He is the president at West Coast. And so he will be with us December 20th. And actually, that's a Sunday. But we'll do something on the Friday night. I know it's at Christmas time, but we'll do something Friday and then maybe like a prayer breakfast or something with him on Saturday, and looking to have that in December. All right. But again, if you'd pray about the college outreach, we could use some help just to see what we can do there. Now, I will say this about the virus, and again, this is kind of our group, and most of you can see things are changing. With example, no one's wearing a face mask in here today, but most of you have heard what? Walmart, I think tomorrow, is it tomorrow? Okay. Okay, so Licking County, and like my wife and I, of course, whenever we do these special events, we'll go to Costco, and of course you see Columbus is much different than Mount Vernon. Okay, everyone has a mask on in Columbus, which I'll just put on the mask. And when I go into some of the stores, since I'm a pastor, sometimes I'll put on the mask because I just don't want to, some people are like, why don't you have a mask on? So, so I'll put the mask on. So, we can pray about this, the decisions that will be made. I will put it this way. Mansfield Baptist Temple, they were open. They've actually have closed and kind of gone back to online services because someone got the virus. Okay. And again, there could be 12 of you who have the virus in here right now. Okay. But I also don't want to live with the spirit of fear because the Bible tells us not to do that. But we also want to make proper decisions. So as of right now, we're doing this. Of course, if the county says you have to wear a mask, we have to kind of do that. But not necessarily the preference, but I think most of you understand that, what we're talking about. So we'll just kind of keep pushing on. I do want to thank you for coming. I don't know if you've noticed this the last 2 weeks. We had 117. Last week we had 115. And many of you know this. There's probably, again, 20 people out there that are not coming because of the virus. And so, we're very thankful. Our numbers are up. Our offerings are normally pretty good. And the Lord has been good through all of this. So just as a reminder. All right, well, let's look at Exodus chapter 8. We get to look at the frogs today. Frogs. Frogs are nice, but I like to see them once in a while. I like to see them at the zoo. Kind of nice, those tree frogs, long, skinny legs, suction cups for their fingers. It's kind of a neat thing. But this wasn't just a one-time little frog. Okay, this is billions, millions of frogs just everywhere. And so we see here chapter 8, verse 1, and the Lord spake unto Moses, go unto Pharaoh, and saying to him, thus saith the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs, and the rivers shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house, and into thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and into thy house of thy servants, upon thy people, and into thine ovens, and into thy kneading troughs. And the frogs shall come up both on thee, and upon thy people, and upon all thy servants. All right, and so here we have the invasion of the frogs. And of course, Moses and Aaron, they go to Pharaoh and they say, what? Let my people go. Let my people go. Now, it's interesting that we even see this same story in Psalms 105, verse 30. It says, their land brought forth frogs in abundance in the chambers of the kings. And so, even thousands of years later there in the Psalms, you would have this thought of, hey, the frogs were there. Now, of course, in Egypt, normally every plague had to do with something with a god of Egypt. And so, of course, the frog represented fertility. Okay? There was actually a god there in Egypt, which was for fertility, childbirth, and of course it would have the head of a frog. Now, the Lord gives a very specific warning, though, to Pharaoh. Let him go, and if you don't let him go, the frogs will be where? Everywhere. In your bed, no matter what. I mean, it's pretty specifically the bed thing here. And you think about a frog being in your bed. Now, I've never had a frog in my bed. Has anyone had a frog in your bed? Okay. I've never had that. Probably the closest thing to it has been a mouse. How many have had a mouse? In the bed, okay? Now, I don't know. You know what kids do to you? They want kitty cats, and they want dogs, and my wife and I are like, oh, let's not. And I think it was just a few years ago, and Maddie said, well, let's get a kitty. Okay, of course, they don't take care of the kitty. So the cat is there and runs around, and to be honest, I like the cat. More than Gretchen liked the cat. I like the cat. Okay, it would run up to me, sit in my lap. Oh, so nice. All right. But we noticed one night we're in bed and we're like, okay, the cat's up in the bed and it's running back and forth. This is like 3 in the morning, back and forth. And of course, it put a mouse up in the bed and it was playing with it, you know, swiping it back and forth, back and forth. And of course, we're like, what's going on? So we turn the light on. Of course, you see the cat, you see the mouse, and it's, of course, it wouldn't kill the mouse. It would just play with the mouse. And so that's the closest thing that we've been to it. But if you can't imagine this, frogs were everywhere. And as you think they're everywhere, you would then say, well, what is Pharaoh's thoughts on that? Well, if you look there at verse 7, as a reminder, and the magicians did so with their enchantments and brought up frogs up out of the land of Egypt. And so one of the things is Pharaoh would continually harden his heart. With every little part of the story, he hardens his heart. As he's hardening it here, part of it is that his own magicians could bring out frogs. Now, I'm not sure how they brought the frogs out. I don't know if it was a magic trick. I don't know if Satan has power, how it happened. It doesn't really say. All we know is that his magicians were able to bring out frogs. And really, probably for the Pharaoh at that point, we all understand, hey, Moses, you brought out frogs, but my magicians can do the same thing. Now, what would have been a better miracle for these magicians would have been what? Get rid of them, okay? But they couldn't get rid of them. They just brought some frogs, just like the snake. They bring forth the snakes there. And, of course, even there, he hardened his heart. And so as you go then to chapter 8, verses 8 through 19, what we're going to see is Pharaoh hardening his heart more. Pharaoh called for Moses, and Aaron said, entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me, from my people, and will let the people go, that they may do sacrifice unto the Lord. And so here he is, he's hardening his heart, but it's pretty interesting there what is happening, okay? And we'll look at it this way, though. What does it mean when we say someone hardens their heart? What does that mean? Okay, they get stubborn. They get upset. And now, we understand, I think many times, maybe with ourselves, something doesn't go to our way, or if you have children and they don't get their way sometimes, they get a little upset. They do what sometimes? They harden. They're like, oh, I'm not going to do that. Well, of course, for them, they should. Why? Children obey. That's their responsibility. Children obey. But sometimes they will harden. Now, we will also do the same in our own lives at different times. Any other thoughts becoming stubborn about what would you say hardening the heart is? Okay. Their own way, okay? It means what we would say when you see clear evidence of the hand of God at work and you still refuse to accept his word and submit to his will. I mean, you see God's hand there, and yet you still refuse to believe. Now, really, we've been in some ways talking about the same thing with the unsaved as Pharaoh in Hebrews. What word did they use rather than hardening heart? Stiff neck, that's one. What's the other one? They had become dull of hearing. Okay, so it's really the same thing that is happening. They heard the truth, but they were rejecting the truth, and they had become dull of hearing. Okay, hardening their hearts. Now, it means to resist by showing what? Ingratitude. I mean, things are given. And again, we can think of sometimes young people, and they just don't understand. It's the same with us. We understand now, okay, you have a house, you have things in your house, and you understand how did those things get in the house. Well, yes, he doesn't know. Well, it took a long time, right, to earn, to buy. You know, you have that bedroom set, Well, some of you might say, yeah, it took us 20 years to get that. And the kids look at that and go, wow, look at mom and dad. They have all those things. Yeah, it took us 20 years. We want it now, okay? And so sometimes the ingratitude that comes about because of that, okay? Disobedience, not having a fear of the Lord. And so, as you remember chapter 5, verse 2, basically Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? Who is he? You know, why should I obey him? Okay? And so the Lord actually was sending these judgments. Why? Because he was wanting to let his people go. And so God was hardening Pharaoh's heart. We can see that. Now, when God hardens his heart, does that mean God is unfair? That's always a good question to think about. God hardened his heart. So what does that mean? Okay. Teach him a lesson. Okay. I also look at it this way. God knows a person's heart. God knows me. He knows what decisions I'm going to make. He knows what I will do today. Why? Because he's God. That's called foreknowledge. He knows the decisions. He knew what Pharaoh would do. And so there's a statement, some of you have heard this, you know, it wasn't unfair. Why? Because the same sun that melts the ice also hardens the clay. Some of you will have a message. Maybe Fred will preach this morning. He's going to preach on the prodigal son. Some people could be here unsaved, and they say, hey, I want to receive Christ. But the person over here says what? No, I don't want any part of it. It's the same message. And so the sun that melts the ice also hardens the clay. Okay, it all depends on the nature of the material. Okay, and so here we have Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was what? He was proud. He was unrepentant. Did he have an opportunity to get things right? He could have let the people go, but he chose not to. That was his choice, okay? Because we all have choice. If we don't have a choice, then we are what? We don't have a free will. We're robots, okay? If I don't have a choice, then that means you don't have a choice. You don't have a free will. But I do have a free will. I have an opportunity. Pharaoh had the opportunity to receive the Lord. He chose not to. The Lord had given him evidence. Now, we look at salvation today, and you say, well, why hasn't God brought judgment? Well, he could be bringing judgment, but also because God is what? He's merciful. Every day that the Lord doesn't come back, more people can receive Christ. Is that correct? More can receive him. And so that should be called what? It's mercy. All right? He's showing mercy to us, allowing people. And some of you are thankful for that mercy, aren't you? Because you have unsaved relatives, unsaved friends that still have an opportunity. The opportunity is still there. And so Pharaoh sinned against the flood of light. All that was there, he sinned. And so he hardened his heart to God's mercy. Now, when you think of this, as you look at verses 8 through 15, he hardened his heart to God's mercy. Now, life was miserable because of frogs. I think when you look at verse 8, it's interesting. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and my people. I mean, he's like, okay, just get rid of them. You know, we've had enough frogs. Now, you look there, he's saying, I'm going to let the people go. I'm going to let them go. Just get rid of the frogs, okay? Now, it is interesting, though. When does Pharaoh ask to get rid of the frogs? Tomorrow. Okay, so Moses there is asking Pharaoh this question. Hey, when do you want to get rid of the frogs? Well, he's saying get rid of the frogs, but let's get rid of them tomorrow. Now, if you wanted to get rid of them, when would you get rid of them? Now. Okay? But it's interesting, why in the world would he say get rid of them tomorrow? Why? Okay? Now, this, of course, then comes into our opinion and what we could think about that. But, Moses, of course, is praying that the frogs are there, and if they're to leave, they will leave when? For Moses' sake. When does Moses want them to leave? Well, he probably would have said now, but tomorrow when the request was being made. Now, why? Because let's say he says tomorrow, but during the night all the frogs scamper away. Sometimes people will say that's just kind of an accident. It's an accident. Hey, they came. It's just one of those freakish accidents. We just all of a sudden somehow the frogs wanted to run out of the river, come into the cities, and we're just bothered by it. You see those things happen every so often if you watch Discovery Channel. Ever seen that? A couple of years ago, I was looking at this thing, and there was spider webs. I think it was like in France. And it showed all these cars on this one street just covered with spider webs. And you say, well, how does that happen? Well, it's just kind of a freakish thing, right? Something that happens once in a while. It just happens. Not sure why. And Pharaoh could have looked at it and said, hey, maybe we'll ask tomorrow, and if they leave before then, God's really not in control then, is he? Okay? And so Moses is probably thinking, hey, may they go tomorrow when we're praying. But Pharaoh, of course, had his scheme. But in the end, did he let the people go? No, he did not. He did not let them go. Now, Moses and Aaron kept their promise. The Lord kept his promise. But Pharaoh refused to obey. He wasn't interested in allowing the people of Israel to go out. Sad to say, again, the application, many times you'll see people say, hey, God, if you get me out of this problem, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Now, does it ever happen? Yeah. Maybe some of you have had that happen in your life, and you followed through. But sad to say, many times people don't follow through, do they? They don't follow through. And the judgment, of course, they're thinking, hey, I don't want the judgment. And God puts it off. And, of course, then they don't follow through. And sad to say, with individuals, that happens. Now, Psalm 66 kind of talks about that. It says, I will go into thy house with burnt offerings. I will pay thee with vows with which my lips have uttered, my mouth have spoken when I was in trouble. When I'm in trouble, I should do what? Go to the Lord. Now, to be honest, I should go to the Lord when? All the time. But most of us understand troubles come our way, whatever it is, and you say, hey, I want to go to the Lord. Nothing wrong with that. Just we want to be consistent. And we can see there in Psalm 66, when the trouble came, there was the individual that was there. It was offering up sacrifices. Now, let's look at verse 16 now of chapter 8. What we see here, it says, and the Lord said to Moses, saying to Aaron, stretch out thy rod, smite the dust of the land. Okay? And so he smites it, that may become lice throughout the land of Egypt. So basically the frogs leave. And God was merciful. And instead of surrendering to God's mercy, what does he do? He hardens his heart. And so we see the third plague. And now, as we look at this, you think of lice. And again, some will look at the lice also as being gnats. Now, one of the things that we would look at this one, you would see that the magicians did not reproduce this one. They did not reproduce it. But really what is happening is they strike, and of course the dust of the ground becomes this lice. Some would say like gnats, lice. And what do we see here? Again, Pharaoh still is hardening his heart. He doesn't want to give in. And so God is keeping on him. Now, the fact is this dust is becoming lice. Now, again, this is a judgment against another god, the god called Set, which is the god of the desert. Of course, if you know anything about Egypt, Egypt pretty much is all desert except the land around the Nile. Okay, all the cities, towns pretty much around the Nile. And they would look at the desert, of course, as protection. Some of you remember school. They would say, like in Egypt, the desert was protection. People could not, easily come and attack because of the desert. So that was something that was there. Now, also the other issue is normally the Egyptians were noted as being very clean people, which is a good thing, being clean. But one of the things we wouldn't like to have is lice. At school there's a few things that we don't like. Lice, all right? Every so often it happens. The gnats, the lice, and you think of the lice and it's like, okay, got to check through the hair. And you got to have the person come in with the comb and, looking for the lice. And it's one of those things, and then everyone's like, oh, it was my kid that had lice. Ooh, how embarrassing. And of course, it's one of those things that happens every so often. But if you're the people of Egypt, and specifically their priest who would shave their bodies just to make sure that they were all cleaned and everything like that, and then all of a sudden get this lice, again, how disgusting. Because that was part of their worship, okay? Now, when we look at this, though, these Egyptians, what they saw was the finger of God. They saw the strong hand of God. They saw the outstretched arm of God. You would see that in chapter 6 specifically. But when you think of the finger of God, a lot of times it's talking about a couple things. It's giving of the law. It's the creations of the heavens, casting out demons as you look at that throughout the Word of God. And of course that shows God's authority. God is in control. He is showing that authority. And so God wasn't through with speaking to Pharaoh or judging the gods of Egypt. He was showing his what? Authority. God is in control. Now, let's turn over to Hebrews chapter 10. And so God wasn't through speaking to Pharaoh. The goal was to let my people go. Because they were not willing to let the people go, God would send 7 more plagues to send. When they were finished, of course, just think about this nation of Israel, or not Israel, but Egypt. What would happen to a nation after going through 10 plagues like this? Right, how? I mean, it's many ways, right? But specifically, what really can cause a lot of damage to a nation? We're kind of seeing it right now. What? Right, the economics. All right, we all understand that. We're dealing with a virus right now, and most of you figured out, even though the stocks keep going up and down, there are a lot of people out of work. That's affecting what? The economy. And even sad to say, if we would think of it this way, let's say the virus was worse. I personally believe it is something, okay, because my daughter works in it. She tells us a little bit about it, how it works. But let's say it was worse. You know, again, it affects the economy. It would totally bankrupt a nation after all this. I mean, think of it this way. All the water turns into blood. That's an issue. When I go to my well and I turn on my faucet, and what comes out? Blood. Well, all of you know we need what? Water. You know, it's not just watering my tomato plant out front, okay? But we only can live so long without water. Even if you think, well, it was only a week. Well, a week? I need water, okay? And so there's that. Of course, then you have the frogs. Now, I will remind you with the frogs, too, it's not as if they ran back into the river. Yeah, they don't run, but they died pretty much in the streets, in the bed, everywhere. They had a major issue. The smell, you have to get rid of them, you know, you have to get rid of it. And of course, then you have the lice, the gnats, and of course, going all through all the different things. And of course, God was trying to get a hold of them. Now, just think of it this way. If they just would have given in at the start, how things could have been different for them. But as you look here, we'll finish up Hebrews chapter 10. We look at verse 31. It's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. It's a fearful thing. Now, may we remember, and even as our nation, it is a fearful thing to fall in the hands of the living God. I think all of us understand what that's talking about. God is merciful, and at a certain point, we will be reminded it's a fearful thing to fall in the hands of the living God. Why? Because at a certain point, God is going to bring about what? Judgment. And, you know, when is that going to come? And for the Egyptians, if they would have just listened, but rather they fell into the hands of the living God. All right, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we do thank you for the book of Exodus. We see so many things, your hand. I do pray that you would be with each one of us. There are times maybe we harden our hearts. We get upset. We become bitter. We don't think you're doing what you should do. But I pray that you would help us to be in your word daily, keeping our hearts soft to the things that you would have for us. Pray that you would bless the service to come and just keep us healthy and safe. Be with our country at this time. And we just thank you for all you've done in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, dismiss.